This is Comic Geek Speak, episode 1679, Off the Racks, Doomsday Clock, number 1.
Laser beams, opinions like the seasons on everything you read in comics, movies, games, toys, artists, Comic Geek Speak, Comic Geek Speak, Comic Geek Speak, Comic Geek Speak, Comic Geek, uniting the world's mightiest heroes. This is...
I'm Brian Chrisman.
I'm Shane Kelly.
And I'm Adam Murdo. Oh, damn it. I'm Adam Murdo.
And I'm Chris Eberly.
That's all right.
I'm sorry, Chris.
It's all right, Murd. I'm forgettable. Don't worry about it.
Unforgettable.
You are far from forgettable, Chris, which is why
That's what you are.
my inserting the "and" into my self-introduction was inexcusable. I apologize.
All right. Well, if you finished singing there, Shane?
Yep.
All right. Well, we wanted to do a little discussion, for me, amongst ourselves, about Doomsday Clock number 1, which came out recently just before Thanksgiving from DC Comics. Because we haven't really talked about it too much on the show. I know there's some discussion out there in the interwebs. I've actually tried to avoid any discussions on it. I know there's a forum thread. I think I might have clicked on it once or twice. But the co-founder of CGS, Peter the Rios, on his podcast, the Daily Rios, has done a whole episode on the Doomsday Clock, and I didn't want to hear it because I want to talk about it and be fresh.
Keep our reactions pure.
Keep our reactions pure and my questions, so forth. So, obviously, spoilers. Forewarned is forearmed. But first, a word from our sponsor. This episode of Comic Geek Speak is brought to you by Athena Voltaire. You first heard about it on Comic Geek Speak back in 2007, and it's finally here. Action Lab Entertainment unleashes Athena Voltaire Pulp Tales, a 320-page collection of prose stories starring the 1930s adventuress, featuring illustrations by Athena Voltaire creator Steve Bryant. Authors include friends of the show, Tom King, Elizabeth Amber Love, Karina Becco and Gabriel Hardman, Dirk Manning, Mike Oliveri, Eric Troutman, Chris Murin, Steve Bryant himself, and nearly a dozen more. These two-fisted stories send the aviatrix across the globe and back again, battling supernatural creatures, power-hungry occultists, and, of course, Nazis. Along the way, she rubs elbows with the most famous figures of the 1930s and becomes part of some of the most pivotal moments in history. There are elements of horror, romance, mystery, suspense, history, and even some philosophy in the mix. These stories have something for everyone. Athena Voltaire Pulp Tales can be ordered at your local comic book shop now and will be available on Amazon on December 19th, just in time for the holiday gift giving or gift card redeeming. It joins the 96-page trade paperback Athena Voltaire and the Volcano Goddess and the 224-page hardcover Athena Voltaire Compendium in the Action Lab library. And if that's not enough, the first issue of the all-new Athena Voltaire ongoing series from Action Lab is also available for pre-ordering in this December's previews. Steve Bryant provides the script, with art by Ismael Canales and colors by Emily Elmer. The first arc, Athena Voltaire and the Sorcerer Pope, pits Athena against both familiar foes and new enemies with the fate of the world in the balance. Order the Nazi punching cover by Steve Bryant or the variant cover by Tom Fowler today. All right, so Doomsday Clock number 1 came out from DC. Let me read what I could find as far as the original solicit for this. Doomsday Clock number 1, written by Geoff Johns, art and cover by Gary Frank. And this is all it really says here that I can find. DC Comics presents to you a 12-issue maxi series from the critically acclaimed team of writer Geoff Johns, artist Gary Frank, and colorist Brad Anderson. You are not prepared for what lies ahead within these pages, good readers. All right.
That's it, huh?
Yeah, that's it. Obviously, well, I shouldn't say obviously, but to me this is obvious a sequel to Watchmen, which I mean, there was the whole thing with before Watchmen a while ago, which actually I have all the issues for it. I don't think I actually read the whole thing to completion.
I think I only have 1 or 2 issues. I've never read any of it either.
Yeah, I bought the Minutemen one, focusing on the Golden Age antecedents.
Okay.
But that was the only one. I kind of refused to buy any of the others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was some backlash there at the time when you, not necessarily tamper, but when you touch on this is so, Watchmen is held more or less in high regards in the comic community.
Sacred cow, if you will.
That's a good thing about that. We actually did an issue-by-issue footnotes on this way back when. Actually, December 15th, 2008, I have here as the first footnotes on Watchmen #1. We actually did one issue a week leading up to the release of the movie at that time in 2009. And I really loved those episodes because I got to sort of put out some things I had like thoughts, and you guys were also great. I really enjoyed that. And
was that the first time you read it?
No, I read it many times before then.
Okay,
it was the first time I read it.
Okay, all right.
I've had the trade. I've since gotten the Absolute, which I have in the studio, but I never actually got the issues.
Oh, really?
So some of the little things like the lettering in the beginning page, like as it went through, that change each week, was lost on me, which they actually sort of picked up here with Doomsday Clock. But yeah, we spent like an hour and 45 minutes on the first issue way back when. Okay, I'm just rambling here right now. Initial thoughts on the issue?
Well, I'll tell you what. I really like the presentation. I like the little cardboard front and back, and I love this kind of paper and the kind of print that it is, the coloring. This is the kind of paper I like because if I'm reading under a light, I mean, light glares on all kind of paper in some way, but this is like a flat paper, not a shiny paper like some of the other comics.
Right, somewhere between the raw pulp and the really glossy stuff.
Yeah. So to open this up and see this with the coloring the way it is, I was just in heaven just from that alone at first because I really do. I love this kind of paper.
Anything besides that, Shane?
No, I'll let everyone else start with the story.
Okay.
I'm just excited about it.
Okay, well, we'll just get some initial thoughts.
Yeah, go ahead, Adam.
Okay. It's palatable so far for this first issue. I'm one of those who feels that perhaps the Watchmen characters should not have been used again after Alan Moore did what he did with them and then set them aside. But that said, I must admit that I'm somewhat guiltily enjoying the ride so far. I don't. One of the things that makes it possible for me to enjoy this as far as I do is the fact that I don't think Johns and Frank are actually setting out to do a Watchmen 2 as such. I mean, they're doing an additional story featuring the Watchmen characters, but it's more a mashup between Watchmen characters and DC characters that can be easily enough discounted as non-canonical by hardcore Watchmen purists, if they so desire. I mean, if there are probably some people out there who would regard the use of the Watchmen characters in this way as, the whole point of the original Watchmen maxi series was kind of a deconstructionist take on the superhero genre, and now here's Johns and Frank basically pressing these characters back into service of the superhero genre, basically conscripting them just to tell rather more conventional superhero stories. I mean, in this first issue, we have a couple of characters going on your basic go out and find messianic character X to save the world. Character X being Dr. Manhattan in this case. And meanwhile, we've got the whole DC universe waiting in the wings for their appropriate entrance cues in future issues. So, yeah, it's not the same kind of story at all. I mean, superficially, Johns and especially Frank do a pretty good job of evoking the tone of the original Watchmen, but it's such a different kind of story. In the first couple of pages, you mentioned the lettering. The lettering is indeed exactly the right kind of lettering to be reminiscent of the original 80s Watchmen, but listening to Johns in this little opening monologue by Rorschach trying to emulate Alan Moore's tone reminds me of nothing more than myself at age 16 trying to write like Ray Bradbury. It's kind of it's awkward and transparent and not very effective. It gets better from there. This first issue does, but yeah. Superficially, this is a decent enough simulacrum of the Watchmen style. I like the as appropriate or inappropriate, your mileage may vary, of this whole project from the start. I think they're doing a fairly good job constructing this little simulacrum of the Watchmen world. I like the new Rorschach. I like the brand new characters, Marionette and Mime. I get the sneaking, slinking suspicion I'll like it a little less as the series wears on and worlds start colliding full tilt. And Johns actually employs a little bit of subtlety in this first issue, which is more than appropriate to a Watchmen story. I'm afraid a little of that is going to get lost as things get bigger and crazier and sillier and more commercial as Watchmen and DC characters start colliding all over the place. But anyway, so far I enjoyed the first leg of the trip, and I'm hoping that it continues to be as enjoyable and as carefully crafted as this first issue was.
All right, Chris. Now, I don't believe. Did we ever get your thoughts? I mean, not to belabor them, but do you ever discuss Watchmen on the show with us before?
Not in great depth. I mean, I'm sure it's come up from time to time for the many episodes I've been on now, but never in depth. No.
Okay. Well, then, what are your initial thoughts here on the Doomsday Clock?
Well, my favorite experience from reading this book was the art. The art is absolutely breathtaking. I've always enjoyed Gary Frank's work. I think he's in peak form here. I think it really lends itself to the world of Watchmen. I like the classic 9-panel layout for the most part. Frank's a master storyteller, and I really like even just like Rorschach, like knocking on the flood door. Just he really knows how to create drama out of simple gestures and moments. So I'm really eating the art up. Otherwise, I kind of echo Murd's sentiments. I mean, this is definitely a mashup. When I read this, I don't feel like I'm reading, obviously, anything close to Alan Moore's Watchmen. In fact, the first few pages really struck me as, wow, Geoff Johns really wants to bring in the politics of our nation today and what's dividing our nation today, and he's clearly putting it in the first few pages of the story. And I don't know how I feel about that. I have mixed feelings about that because Moore created a very specific version of sort of America when he did Watchmen, and very much rooted, obviously, in Cold War paranoia of the 1980s and the arms race and so forth. And this world we're looking at now, which is still supposed to be the world of Watchmen, is clearly the world of Donald Trump.
Right.
I mean, if you read the description, right down to the kind of ham-fisted reference to a wall and people flooding into Mexico and so forth and so on. So I'm not sure how I feel about that. I mean, if you're just trying to make it topical for readers today, okay, I get it. But to me, this is not really the world of the Watchmen characters that we read in that, the masterpiece that came out in the mid-1980s. I'm interested to see how you guys feel about that, because out of this whole story, it's the first few pages that really struck me the most. Granted, it's because I'm a history teacher and I'm just always attuned to current events and just interested in things like that. But like the references to North Korea and all that. It's just, then he has William Buckley Jr. as the spokesperson for the new, basically fascist newscasts. Now all the independent newscasts have been shut off. So this to me is very much a setup issue, and I'm interested. I'm definitely along for the ride, Mister, to see where it's going to go. More than anything, to see how they're going to incorporate the DC heroes. Because let's face it, it's been a long build up to this. What's it been? Pants over a year.
Oh, yeah, I was going to get to that. DC Rebirth #1 came out like the end of May of 2016. So it's been about a year and a half. We've been waiting for something to build, and this is the next step that Johns is taking. Now, if I'm not mistaken, this might be the only thing he's written since Rebirth. Does that sound about right?
It might be.
Because he's been doing with a lot with the DC and the movies and what have you, with Wonder Woman specifically, I believe, and Justice League as well. But I'm happy to see him come back to revisiting the events of Rebirth, where we learned Dr. Manhattan essentially stole about 10 years of time from the DC universe. Yeah, and this is what's come out of that. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Chris. If you had anything else to say,
no, not at all, sir. No, that was. You just reminded me that this is also DC's escape hatch for the New 52 as well.
Correct.
Which is amusing.
Fingers crossed.
What did he just say? We're never going back. Right.
There is no back door.
Right, yes.
Yeah.
But But I recall that when they had the Before Watchmen stories come out, I think it was like Dr. Manhattan #4 of that series, they thought that Dr. Manhattan sort of created the new post-Flashpoint universe. There was some sort of scene with a garden or what have you. I mean, I haven't read it, I just remember reading about it at the time. It was a big, hot back issue at the time. I'm not sure that's really valid now because of more of the Rebirth where he's sort of taking time away.
Yeah.
But anyway, my initial thoughts for the issue, I really enjoyed it. I love Watchmen. As you can hear in those episodes, I really just gushed about Watchmen. And again, the Gary Frank art, yes, very reminiscent. The 9-panel grids, I loved. So many things about this. The end material where they have news clippings, very reminiscent, of course, of the Watchmen. Some of my initial questions, I mean, there's so many questions here. Who is Rorschach? Because it's clearly not the original Rorschach.
Right.
You mentioned, and he's, shows his hand that he's black. Mm-hmm. So, of course, my mind goes to, let me look back in Watchmen here. Well, could it be Bernie, the kid who was reading comics?
Could be if he hadn't pretty clearly been incinerated.
Correct. Or could it be Dr. Malcolm Long, who was with Rorschach all that time? But again, he too was more or less at ground zero in issue 11 of Watchmen when the whole plan went about. Or could it be a new character we don't know, or whatever? Who knows? We'll find out.
Or could it be a DCU character?
That's what I thought too.
That's another thing. And at the very beginning here, this is 1992, 7 years after the events of Watchmen. Mm-hmm. How does that tie into present-day DC? We've yet to see. A couple of little neat things. I'm sure you picked up on this, Adam, with the Marionette and the Mime sort of being like the Punch and Julie analogs of the Charlton universe.
Yep, following the same formula that Moore did, just taking Charlton characters and extrapolating something new, rawer, and bloodier from them.
So I enjoyed that. I remember, I think at the very end, I'm going to pull out my Watchmen omnibus here, towards the end of issue 12, when, of course, all the post things in New York have happened, and Seymour is walking along the streets, and you see a New York Gazette newsstand, like a dispenser magazine of newspapers, and it says RR to run in 88. Of course, we're thinking maybe Ronald Reagan.
Yeah.
Probably it's Robert Redford, according to this. So how about that? I like that. And they mention you also do have to read these back pages, like you didn't. You get so much more out of it. Like Seymour David, who has the journal, Rorschach's journal, I should mention there.
Yeah.
It mentions in the back matter of Doomsday Clock that he's been killed and the journal was gone. And then we see in some of the back pages of like upcoming covers, Batman has the journal. It's like, okay, so yeah, I'm intrigued about that. I'm not necessarily go the sacred cow about Watchmen. I'm along for the ride for this. I thought it was very interesting, the use of Superman here with he doesn't dream, but he had a dream here, and of course he dreamed it into 12 panels.
Yeah,
I thought it was a very good first issue. I'm along for the ride, of course, because I want to see how this all plays out. I like Johns, I like Gary Frank, I like Watchmen. We'll see how it goes, and mixing a DC. Okay, because overall I've been sort of not so up on the Rebirth, but the stories after the one shot. But I love all-encompassing things, like Crisis, those big events. And this feels to me like it could be a big event.
Big events that mean something, not an event just to be an event, which we've had so many of in recent years.
Let's again, fingers crossed that it turns out to be that, and not just a big money grab of mashing up DC and Watchmen.
I agree with what you say, Pants, and everybody really, that you're along for the ride. I certainly am. I love the artwork, like Chris. I think it's absolutely beautiful, just spectacular to look at. The writing, I like John, so I'm excited to see him write something that's got 12 issues to it. I'm somewhat a little bit skeptical in that does it need 12 issues, but that's something that remains to be seen as the story progresses. Maybe at the end we'll all think, oh God, that was way too long. Should have only had 8 or something. But we'll see. It could be fantastic, and we'd want more. I do like the way that they threw Superman in there towards the end. I didn't at first. The first few pages, I wanted something of DC to shout out in those first few pages. But as I kept reading, I completely forgot about that, and I got a little bit more immersed than what I expected to in the what could be the current state of the Watchmen universe, reading it, and then all of a sudden you get to the back where Clark comes in. I'm like, oh, that's right. They've got to come in here sometime. Because I was really getting immersed in reading everything that was leading up to that point. I found it interesting that he had a nightmare like what you said, Pants. I expected more than just him to show up, though, honestly, but it's fine. We start with Superman.
Well, you can't throw everybody
in there, but
exactly. The two worlds kind of seep together slowly.
I just expected something else, but it's fine. It really worked out well the way it was done. I don't know if I'm happy that Watchmen are getting thrown into here or not yet. I'm reserving that until later. I think it's an interesting. I think it's more. It could be more interesting than what before Watchmen turned out to be, because at first I was somewhat excited about that, but ended up only getting a couple issues, not really reading any of it, and then that kind of all went nowhere. So I am interested to see what happens with this. If it works well, if it was something that should have never been done, or if it's something that, oh my God, I'm so glad they did it. Now let's see where they go from here. If they stay, or if they, at the end of it, they separate again and two universes stay apart. But yeah, I like the first issue. It was done well enough. And I wanted to ask you, Pants, did you choose that cover specifically, or that's just what was there?
I think when I have the cover with the end is near placard on it. Everybody else has the Superman cover. I got this one because I think it was the cheapest one at DCBS when I ordered it. I don't think the other one was the same price for some reason. I don't know. But yeah, going forward, I've chosen the covers. I think I have the Rorschach Journal Batman cover. I think I have the Lex Luthor cover.
I've gone with all the ones that have DC characters on them just because that's my favorite of what I've seen.
Going off on a bit of a tangent, I'm going to watch carefully because Gary Frank's art agent almost always, when he has artwork to sell, it almost always goes through eBay. I mean, I've seen Gary Frank at shows and just, go through my eBay guy, which I know, and I've kept an eye on some pages for you, Shane. I think there was one you really wanted from DC Rebirth with the Ted Cord Beetle.
Oh, that's right.
And that's already been and gone.
Yeah.
But Gary Frank's artwork generally is rather pricey because, hey, it's good stuff, and he's on his own big title. So I'm very curious how this art's going to play out because, Watchmen art from the original series with Dave Gibbons, oh my God, that's
that goes off the
hook. I mean, tens of thousands of dollars for pages there. So I mean, I'm curious about that aspect of it. There's a lot of stuff going on here that I'm really going to keep my eye on. But as far as the story goes, I thought I got off to a real good start. I'm in. It's curious to see what's going to happen with Adrian Veidt. He's been I've been hiding a little bit now, and he's got cancer.
Well, he's the most wanted man in America.
Wanted man, in the world, I would think.
That's true. International, yeah.
Definitely America. And, I'm along for the ride here.
And not to sound silly, I know I started off talking about the quality of the paper and the way it looks. That excited me more because sometimes I think they put things in a format just to get it out there, and it's more expensive than what I would have cared to pay for it, and I don't like the format it's in. Whereas $4.99 is the cover price. I know we didn't pay that because like you guys, I ordered it through DCBS, and I know I got it for less than that.
It was half off.
But I still appreciate this kind of a format and the way the paper and the ink and the coloring and the art looks. It just looks spectacular. So even from an aesthetic standpoint, I would have enjoyed this just looking at it because it looks so damn good compared to some other stuff that's out there right now.
One comment I want to make, first of all, I'm glad they dedicated the book to Len Wein.
Yes.
At the end, which I thought was because he was the editor of the original Watchmen series, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So I thought that was all but appropriate. My other question, because I haven't been reading New 52 Superman, his parents died in a car crash?
Yeah, that's a good thing for us to discuss,
yes,
Chris.
Please.
Yeah, because I'm not sure about that myself.
Or is that a result of what's happening just right now in this merging, or did that happen in New 52? Because I haven't read Superman books.
I think it's a detail from Grant Morrison's run in Action Comics, right at the very beginning of the post-Flashpoint era, and I think there was a fifth dimensional being named Vindictiviz that was some way involved in that.
I'm sorry, I can't answer that, so I'm looking at you for the...
Well, yeah, that's the thing.
Help us, Murd, help us.
I'm pretty sure it is peculiar because the Superman and Lois in the current New 52 or Rebirth reality are actually, I mean, they're the pre-Flashpoint Superman and Lois.
That's correct.
Who brought their son with them after the Convergence event.
Right.
And I think at some point they got their life essences merged with their post-Flashpoint counterparts so that they could more comfortably occupy this revised reality. So maybe old Superman has some of new Superman's memories flapping around inside of his head.
Right, because he says here, it was the night my parents died.
Yeah, and that's certainly not the way pre-Flashpoint Superman would naturally remember things. So, but of course, this whole pre-Flashpoint, post-Flashpoint business has a lot to do with Dr. Manhattan.
Yes.
So it's fitting that there would be some kind of point of discrepancy between pre-Flashpoint and post-Flashpoint Superman, who are now one and the same. That this would serve as the entry point for the DC reality into the narrative.
Well, what's interesting to me, and one of the main reasons I'm going to read this, besides the creators involved and just the premise, is that they've clearly been alluding, going back to the dramatic moment when Barry Allen was reunited with Wally West, which gets pants every time when they did the Rebirth one-shot. You know, they're teasing you with the notion that they're going to, if not restore, somehow revive or incorporate elements of the original DC universe back into whatever you want to call the continuity as it stands now. So I'm interested to see how they do. I mean, I've been on record many times. I thought New 52 was a terrible idea, and I thought it was ultimately futile and totally unnecessary because the comic industry, you know, doesn't command the numbers or money to that would do anything to actually rejuvenate it, because it didn't. So that being said, what I'm most in for here is to see how they use the Watchmen characters to whatever it is they plan on doing when it comes to what they've been teasing us with for over a year now. So that's what's captivating me. I mean, what do you guys think of the way Rorschach was portrayed, this new Rorschach in the story?
I thought it was okay. It didn't strike me as polar difference to the original Rorschach all that much.
The dialogue is fun to read.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that he's fully embracing the fact that this is a different character.
Yeah.
So that way, if anything in his portrayal does seem sort of off-kilter from the way Moore wrote the character, we could just chalk it up to the fact that it's not the same person under the mask.
I just love when they're driving and she asks him, well, can you see through? And he just says, perfectly. And no, I enjoyed the portrayal of Rorschach quite a bit. I like the fact they didn't take the easy way out and like resurrect the original. I like that it's
Yeah.
Because that would have been, I think, an excessive cheap shot of what Moore did in his story. So I'm glad they resisted that, because you could easily have seen them trying something like that, and having a new character. I mean, again, he's just as adept at horrific violence as the original Rorschach. When you see him dealing with the convicts in the prison.
Well, and like when they're going through the flood doors and they're talking to him, and he's just answering them very, very abruptly, like, "No, don't remember what it left." I can still hear the original Rorschach through that enough that he's embraced being Rorschach fully, whether it's because he read the journal or because he was with them all the time, or for whatever the case may be.
Yeah, which leads me to think it might be Dr. Kelly, since he spent some time with him.
But it's still like Merge said, it's still different enough that you can tell it's not, whether it be because of the writing or intentionally done. It's not, but it still makes sense. Like, they did a good job of creating this new Rorschach to do whatever he's going to do in this story.
And actually, I stand corrected. I'm sorry, it wasn't Rorschach killing all the cons. It was the guy that got out of prison.
Marionette.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, the mime. The
mime, yep.
And we also learn that, according to Ozymandias, that Night Owl is alive, but he's retired.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure we'll see everybody eventually.
Yeah. Or at least a version of them.
Well, at the end of the story, Night Owl was with Silk Spectre, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, they went off as lovers, so
yes.
Why would he come back?
Right.
So,
what is the significance of the final quote of the issue? He meets some fragment huge and stops to guess what powerful but unrecorded race once dwelt in that annihilated place.
And the title of the story is That Annihilated Place.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's a quote from the poem Ozymandias, from which Adrian Veidt also takes his name, and it's about a traveler in the desert who comes across the last standing stones of a once mighty palace in a once mighty city in a once mighty empire, and he finds an inscription that reads, "I am Ozymandias, king of kings. Gaze upon my works, ye mighty, and despair." Very deeply ironic double meaning to those words. When originally inscribed, it was, "Look at this wonderful thing I've built," and despair at ever matching my might. But then when the traveler comes across it and it's long, centuries past been ruined, "Gaze upon my works, ye mighty, and despair" means, hey, guess what, mighty people? Everything you build is going to turn to dust, just like my former citadel has. So, yeah, I guess it's a little soon to know what the precise...
I'm wondering if it means by annihilated place the pre-Flashpoint DC universe.
Yeah.
That crossed my mind as well, yes.
It could be Adrian Veidt's brain, too, for that matter.
True, yeah.
And did anybody pick up on the front page of the New York Gazette in the back that that President Redford is saying that the whole thing that happened in New York was a hoax?
Yeah.
Under Operation Commodus.
Fake news, right?
Yeah. Goodness gracious me.
Goodness, yeah.
I wonder if they intend that to be Robert Redford.
Well, that's what I thought when I mentioned about the RR for president.
Well, because just Robert Redford is, very liberal in real life, so it's interesting. This is the part of the story, again, going back to my earlier comments, that I'm most conflicted about, and just that, and I'm not criticizing, I'm just observing that, Johns is clearly imposing his politics here, I think, in terms of how he's sort of describing the world. Or at least he's imposing a view of divisiveness that many people feel right now in our actual, American reality. What do you guys think about that, those first few pages? That's what struck me the most about this whole book.
I think for how the Watchmen universe was, it's out of place.
I mean, that's how I felt about
like
it.
You said, like you said earlier, I thought it was odd to kind of horseshoe that in there when there's a distinctive way that universe was set up, and to shoehorn what's happening now in there, and then coming back with like possibly Robert Redford being president here. I don't know. I didn't like those first few pages. It just didn't read well for me.
Well, beyond, as I said earlier, seeming like an amateurish attempt to imitate Alan Moore's writing style, I'll dissent here. I actually think that putting in the present-day topical stuff was a good move. I mean, Johns is trying to bring across to us that we've got just as much to be paranoid and fearful about in 2017, if not more so, than was had back in the dark days of the 80s of the Reagan and Margaret Thatcher years. So he's trying to build that sense of cultural paranoia and mounting panic as a sort of a counterpoint to the story he's telling, as Moore did back in those days. That's actually one of the things I think Johns was right to do in this issue. Again, I agree with Chris that it was somewhat ham-fisted, but I'm glad he at least made the attempt.
But isn't the stuff that happened in the first Watchmen a result of like an alternate timeline of our historical events?
Yeah, it was all altered by
Dr. Manhattan's
exactly.
appearance.
That's why there were certain technologies, for example, that existed in the Watchmen's world that certainly didn't exist here in the mid-'80s.
Okay. So then taking that, wouldn't that exasperate that timeline to be different, whereas we're shoehorning in the way life is now into something that should not be that way?
That means things got to the point they are now, some 25 years ahead of schedule back in 1992.
Oh, all right. I see what you're saying.
I mean, Mert, I think you made a good point, and I'm not saying I'm turned off by it. It just – because believe me, I think what's going on in our country should be discussed at every moment we possibly can in every kind of meeting, because I think it's that serious. But I think looking more at it as a reader who's read Watchmen, it struck me as just, like Shane said, like it didn't feel right. But having said that, you made a good point about because like you said in the original Watchmen, like Richard Nixon's president in perpetuity, essentially, and it was a different reality. So you could definitely explain that. Okay, things just where we are now in the world and our nation that this happened there a lot sooner, and that I can go with that. It's more from a being just a reader of the original, which I've read, of course, several times. It just struck me as odd because it didn't feel like it fit in with the world of Watchmen. But again, like I think you made a very good point. Time has passed, and maybe things are just went along faster there because it already was on a different timeline, so to speak. Because obviously we didn't have Richard Nixon as president, repeatedly. So
yeah, I didn't think about it in those terms. About 25 years passing here, but also there, making everything happen faster there. That does make somewhat sense in that
Plus,
way.
whenever Dr. Manhattan's involved, time becomes somewhat fluid.
Yeah.
I wanted to go back again to some of the back matter with the obituary for Mr. Byron Lewis.
Mothman.
Yes. And curious because there was sort of a death of one of the original Minutemen, of course, a comedian that brought the heroes together in the first Watchmen. Maybe it's something along those lines, another parallel perhaps in this one here.
Well, Pants, I echo your sentiment. I really like the back matter. I like, again, how they're trying to... I always love when comics will use other media within a comic book to try to flesh out a story and just provide more insight or just different perspectives on the reading experience because, besides... if you're getting more bang for your buck, at least I do. That's why I love so many of the Image books now, because you're getting, back matter and some of those, like the stuff that Brubaker and Sean Phillips do, for example. So it's nice to do that here as well.
Yeah, because that was
go ahead. I'm sorry.
That was a big part of the original Watchmen series, the back matter. I also did you notice in the story itself there was a shot of the Gunga Diner. And there's actually a very brief mention, sort of cut off here at the nuclear disarmament talks article, that Gunga Diner food poisoning confirmed.
Yeah.
Touch back on that. I mean, there's so many. Well, I mean, we did with the whole footnotes on the first Watchmen series. There's so much going on in those issues and beyond.
Well, it'll be interesting when this story is complete to kind of revisit it, looking at it as one complete story and see what else. I'm sure we're going to notice other underlying themes and Easter eggs and so forth. Because Geoff Johns is an outstanding writer, so I can imagine how much thought has gone into this. I can only imagine how many times he probably read Watchmen before he started writing the story. Man, the art is gorgeous. I'm just looking at. And how beautiful is the coloring in this book? Holy mackerel! And Shane, that's where I think the quality of paper really makes a difference too, as you mentioned.
I don't know if I realized with the back matter that if you're looking at the New York Gazette and you flip the page,
it's
they
taken
just
away.
remove the.
Well, yeah.
I didn't realize the outlying area. I don't know why I never noticed that.
Yeah, this is a really beautifully produced comic, as it should be. Considering what it is, but they did a really nice job on it.
Yeah, I agree with all that all of you have said about the artwork. Gary Frank, I think, deserves more credit even than Johns for helping to evoke the feel of the original Watchmen. And there are very few artists working today who can walk that fine line between the realistic and the grotesque and tease out elements of the latter in the former than Frank can. So he's really the only other artist I can think of who might have been as good, and maybe even not that a choice, is the late Steve Dillon.
Oh, yeah, good point, Mert. And props to Brad Anderson, the colorist, and Rob Lee, the letterer. Or Rob Lee, excuse me. Outstanding work. So.
All right. Anything else to bring about the issue? Just sort of a brief overview of issue 1. We might touch on this story later on. But
I'm sure we will.
I wanted to get our thoughts on it, and everyone else's thoughts in the room here and on the phone as well, Chris, because I've sort of been in a isolation booth about this story so far. I wanted to talk about it. Now I can listen to Peter's episode now and feel free.
That's right, and we can visit that thread on the forum.
Yes.
Here's what our listeners have been saying. There's like 26 posts on there right now.
Oh, wow. So. I think I saw there's only like 3 or 4.
No, there's a lot more than that now.
Oh, excellent.
We've seen some action over the weekend.
Excellent.
Cool. One further Easter egg I wanted to just point out.
Sure.
And this is in the couple-of-page Superman scene at the end.
Okay.
Clark Kent apparently has B.F. Skinner on his nightstand.
Yes.
And B.F. Skinner is a controversial behavioral psychologist. known for his work in the mid-20th century. Some controversial views on the nature of free will and human behavior. And Walden 2 is the book that Superman's reading. It's actually a work of fiction that Skinner wrote. It's kind of a utopian novel about a world where and all the environmental variables that Skinner believed helped to determine free will and errant behavior had been eliminated, and so it's just kind of this clockwork society, the kind of thing that would be appealing to, say, a certain John Osterman alias.
Huh.
So just something to think about going forward. It's not the kind of thing you'd expect Clark to be interested in, except as kind of a study of an eccentric though brilliant mind, something that he as Superman could guard against happening in real life.
Oh, I'm sorry, another Easter egg in the back with the ads. Schrodinger's clock and watch repair. Broken is a state of mind. We specialize in antique clocks, pocket watches, and grandfather clocks. Reasonable prices, all repairs done in house. And then serving Manhattan for over, I can't see, 30, I can't see because of the fold here. Look, is it 30 years? I get that. But then it says 1935 Bowery. Of course, 1935, essentially when DC Comics started.
Yeah.
Little, oh, and of course, 555, 1985 was the phone number.
Yeah, Schrodinger, of course, being a reference to the famous physicist. And
The
broken
cat.
is a state of mind. Yeah, right, the cat. And broken is a state of mind. I think that's a paraphrase of Ayn Rand, actually, who was a big influence on Steve Ditko.
Yeah. Wow. So again, a lot of things going on in this issue here.
I think it's also interesting looking at Superman laying there. You not only see his uniform, his outfit kind of thrown over the chair, but also I wonder what us in 1, 2, 3, 4, the fifth panel on that page, what us looking through his glasses at him means. There's got to be something there.
Well, they're not really prescription. They're just
They're just glasses.
Yeah.
But something else is there. Being on top of that book, looking at Superman, looking at Clark through those glasses might mean something. I mean, I can be reading into nothing, but
oh, sure, we all are. Lots of stuff going on here.
Mert, I want to thank you for that little just Walden 2. I want to reassure our listeners that once again, Professor Mert's office hours will be posted.
My door is always open.
All right. Well, if there's nothing else, I guess we'll wrap it up for this episode.
yeah.
All right. Fun. Once again, the episode was brought to you by Athena Voltaire, with the Athena Voltaire pulp tales available through Amazon. And, of course, in the latest previews, the new ongoing Athena Voltaire from Action Lab, available for pre-order in the latest previews catalog. Are you ready there, Shane?
Yippers.
Okay.
Visit us at comicgeekspeak.com. To send us an email, the address is comicgeekspeak@gmail.com. To leave a voicemail, the number is 267-702-6642. Stop by thecomicforums.vanillaforums.com and let us know what you all think of Doomsday Clock. Most of you haven't. We haven't read it yet. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook. We would like to thank everyone who contributes to the show. Please keep doing it. We appreciate it and couldn't do it without you. And as always, we are uniting the world's mightiest heroes, one listener at a time.
You got it on Wednesday, and it was like about it going to the volume up. These guys will talk about it, everything that geeks love. From cakes to laser beams, opinions like the